are then ready to call to order and check who's here.
All righty. So I'll call a roll call. I'll start with Asada Brown.
Present.
Monica Dillenberg.
Here.
Cecily Harris.
Here.
Todd Kemry. Not here today.
Not so far.
Okay. We'll move on. Bob Moeller.
Here.
Jeremy Peichel.
Here.
Anthony Taylor.
Not seeing him yet.
Not yet. Okay. Kana Yang.
Here.
And Tony Russo.
I'm here.
All righty. We do have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you. That will move to approval of our agenda that we can take by consensus. Do we have anyone who needs to add a change or adjustment to our agenda? Right, hearing none, we'll consider our agenda approved by consensus and move to approval of minutes from our October 7th meeting. For that, we will take a motion second and ultimately vote from somebody who was present at that meeting.
So moved.
Okay, and who was it that made that motion?
Sorry, that was Jeremy.
Okay, I heard two voices, so we'll consider who was the other one.
Sada.
Okay, Asada, do you want to have that be our second then?
Sure.
Okay, so we have a second from Asada. Are there any corrections to those minutes? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and proceed with a roll call vote on approval of the minutes as presented from our October 7th meeting. Go ahead with that, Sandy.
Thank you. Asada Brown.
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg.
Aye.
Cecily Harris.
Aye.
Do we have Todd Kemry yet? Not seeing him. Bob Moeller.
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel.
Aye.
How about Anthony Taylor? Has he logged on yet? Not seeing him. We'll move on to Kana Yang
Aye.
and Tony Russo.
Aye.
Okay. The minutes are approved.
All right, thank you. That brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting for people to address the committee for anything not on our agenda for the day. We've been taking those as a pre-registration by email to the council staff. Did we get anyone on for today?
Not that I'm aware of, Chair.
No, we did not.
Okay, thank you. Then with that, we'll move on to our first business item, the Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail Master Plan for Three Rivers Park District. And we have Colin Kelly and Chee Yang presenting. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. Good afternoon, Chair Russo, Council Member Bento, and Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. I am Colin Kelly, Regional Parks Planning Analyst, and I'm here to present the Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail Master Plan on behalf of Three Rivers Park District. As mentioned, I am joined by my colleague Chee Yang, Regional Parks Planner, who will be presenting the second half of this presentation today. I should also note that Jonathan Flaming, Kelly Grisman, and Maggie Hurong with the Park District are here today, and one or more of them may respond to questions after this presentation, if needed. Next slide, please. The 17-mile Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail is located in the western part of the regional park system in Hennepin County in the cities of Maple Grove, Plymouth, Minnetonka, and Eden Prairie. The maps on the left and in the middle are figures 1 and 2 in the staff report. For planning purposes, the Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail was broken into two major trail segments, the approximately 12-mile Eagle Lake Trail segment to the north and the approximately 5-mile Bryant Lake Trail segment to the south. Further, the overall regional trail corridor has been broken into 5 segments, A to E, north to south. The map on the right is Figure 3 in the staff report. Related, I should note that the Park District wishes to split the Eagle-Bryant Lake Regional Trail Search Corridor into two distinct but interconnected regional trails, the Eagle Lake Regional Trail and the Bryant Lake Regional Trail, which is an approach that is supported by local communities. Council staff recommend formalizing this change during the next Regional Parks Policy Plan update, anticipated for 2024. Next slide, please. Before the official kickoff to the planning process for the trail corridor, the Park District partnered with the cities of Maple Grove, Plymouth, Minnetonka, and Eden Prairie, Hennepin County, and the Minnesota Department of Transportation, or MnDOT, on the West Metro Regional Trail Study. The Park District refers to this as Phase 1 of the engagement process. During the trail planning process itself, the Park District continued to partner with these local jurisdictions and agencies, and also coordinated with the Metropolitan Council for a preliminary review of the trail plan. The Park District refers to this as Phase 2 of the engagement process. During Phase 1, the intent of engagement was to gather preliminary feedback on potential north-south regional trails, including the public's interest, priorities, and concerns. The project team facilitated 9 in-person activities and used several online tools to gather feedback. As a result, over 700 people provided comments, and the feedback obtained during this phase was the source of the planned trail route. Phase 2 focused on the draft master plan itself, which included 12 more in-person engagement events and additional use of online tools. The draft plan was also shared with each of the stakeholders referenced on this slide. Next slide, please. On the last slide, you heard a little bit about some of the methods the Park District used to engage both partners and the public via in-person activities and online. Here, we focus on the outcomes of those engagements, acknowledging that some of the planned in-person events were canceled as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of the key takeaways from Phase 1 included a desire for park-like settings and a desire for connections to destinations like parks, green space, natural areas, shopping, and entertainment spaces. Phase 2, which involved more targeted engagement with adjacent neighbors and underrepresented groups, had some similar findings as Phase 1, but also included overall support for the North-South Regional Trail Corridor, a desire to enhance or improve trail crossings at busy intersections for safety, making wayfinding signage and information more user-friendly, and adding or improving amenities. Also, while this regional trail corridor was generally supported by those engaged in these processes, there were some residents who were concerned over loss of privacy and vegetation or other impacts to property. Related, there were some who felt the Park District could or should consider different types of engagement processes during the planning effort. As a result of some of the feedback received, the Park District has committed to engaging local residents, particularly in the Baker Road area, during the design phase. Next slide, please. Throughout the planning process, the Park District reached out to and engaged with multiple community groups who will likely benefit from the regional trail. These groups included Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or BIPOC community members, women, households with incomes less than $75,000, people under the age of 17 and over 60 years old, non-English speaking people, and people for whom English is their second language. The Regional Trail Plan notes that each of these groups is considered underrepresented on regional trails. Geographically speaking, the Park District was looking at the demographics of a 3-mile travel shed from the trail corridor. Within that space, they learned that the area continues to diversify with regard to income, race, ethnicity, and age due to a variety of factors, including the development of affordable housing and public transit. Overall, the Park District was interested in an inclusive process that allowed stakeholders to explore options and issues while contributing their insights about the corridor. Alternative venues for community engagement were explored to capture feedback from the general public, affected residents, and underrepresented community groups, As mentioned previously, the pandemic created real challenges for connecting with people in person, and so some events were shifted to a virtual environment, while others were canceled. That said, common questions or concerns that were shared include the safety of road crossings, striking a balance between natural resource protection and development, potential private property impacts, and the timing of trail development or corridor improvements. The third bullet point here expands on the Phase 1 findings referenced on the last slide, adding important connections to housing, schools, jobs, services, and transit facilities. Looking to the future, the Park District is committed to exploring and pursuing different ways to engage with underrepresented groups, adjacent residents, and others in its district-wide planning efforts, and as this specific trail moves into design and development phases in the years ahead. Next slide, please, and I will hand it off to Chee.
Thank you, Colin. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Awesome. Hello, Chair and Commissioners. I will now present the rest of the presentation, and I'm going to begin with the concept development. The Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail is broken into two major segments, the Eagle Lake Trail and the Bryant Lake Trail. These two trails are further broken into smaller segments, which are mainly defined by city limits. I'll begin with the Eagle Lake Trail. On the right of the presentation, the map illustrates the entire length of the Eagle Lake Trail. This figure is the expanded version of Figure 3 from the business item, which Colin presented earlier. This trail is about 12.3 miles and is broken into three segments. Segment A is the start of the Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail and is represented by the yellow line on the map. This is a 1.1 mile segment. This segment is mostly within Eagle Lake Regional Park, which ends at Eagle Lake Drive. 0.7 miles of this trail is existing and 0.5 miles are planned. Do note that some of the existing trails may need improvements to meet regional trail design standards. Segment B is entirely within the city of Plymouth, highlighted as the maroon line on the map. It starts from Eagle Lake Drive, making its way south to Ridgemount Avenue. This is a 7.1 mile segment with 5.9 miles existing and 1.2 mile planned. This segment connects to three other regional trails, Bassett Creek, Medicine Lake, and Loose Line regional trails. Additionally, the segment that runs along Zachary Lane is recognized as a regional bicycle transportation network, also known as the RBTN Tier 1 Alignment Tier 2 Corridor. The last segment of the Eagle Lake Trail is segment C. It is the sky blue line on the map and is within the city of Minnetonka. It is a 4.1 mile long segment stretching from Ridgemount Avenue to Minnetonka Boulevard. 3.4 miles are existing and 0.7 miles are planned. Segment C ends at Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail. The segment along Hopkins Crossroad is the RBTN Tier 1 corridor. The southern part of segment C along Plymouth Road is the RBTN Tier 2 alignment. Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail is the endpoint of the Eagle Lake Trail and the starting point of the Bryant Lake Trail. Next slide, please. This is the Bryant Lake Trail. It is about 4.7 miles total in length. The map on the right illustrates the entire trail. Segment D is the orange line on the map. It is 3.7 miles long and is in the city of Minnetonka. 0.6 miles of this trail is existing and 3.1 miles are proposed. Segment D connects to Lake Minnetonka LRT and the Minnesota River Bluffs LRT regional trails. Segment D ends at Highway 62. The RBTN categorized the first part of Segment D along Baker Road as a Tier 1 alignment. Segment E is the last segment and is indicated as the purple line on the map. It starts from Highway 62 and terminates in Bryant Lake Regional Park in the city of Eden Prairie. This 1 mile segment is existing. Segment E is the last segment for the Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail. Next slide, please. The total cost estimated for acquisition and development of the entire regional trail is approximately $13.2 million. About $5.6 million is the total cost to develop the Eagle Lake Trail and $7.6 million for the Bryant Lake Trail. The total estimated operating and maintenance budget is about $100,000 annually. The approval of the master plan does not commit the council to any funding at this time. Next slide, please. The Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, Planning Strategy 1, and other council policies. Next slide, please. For the proposed action, we are asking the Metropolitan Council to 1, approve Three Rivers Park District's Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail Master Plan. 2, acknowledge Three Rivers Park District's intent to split the Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail Search Corridor into 2 distinct but interconnected regional trails, the Eagle Lake Regional Trail and the Bryant Lake Regional Trail. This will be documented in the next 2024 Regional Parks Policy Plan update. And lastly, prior to any regional trail development, require Three Rivers Park District to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager for review. This concludes the presentation. Please let us know if you have questions or comments. As a reminder, Park District staff members are here to help answer questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Commissioners, what questions do we have to start? Or lacking any of those, would anyone, oh, I see a hand up for Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. My question is about generally the concept of dividing the 2 trails. I can understand why that might be useful to target the engagement better to the populations that are local to each segment. But I'm wondering if there are negative impacts associated with the application for funding, and what was the ultimate motivation for balancing those positives and negatives to propose that item 2, that we would split these 2 trails.
Yes, who would like to speak to that?
I can start us off.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Maggie Hirung with Three Rivers Park District. I'm the associate planner and was a project manager on this master plan. First, I want to say thank you, Chair Yaruso and fellow commissioners, for having us this afternoon. And second, like you mentioned, we split the trail into 2, or the corridor into 2 trails, mostly because the community then can better identify with that trail in their community and neighborhood, and better recognize which regional parks and assets these trails will connect them to. However, I will defer kind of the balance of pros and cons to Kelly, because I think she might be better equipped to answer that question.
Hi, Chair Yaruso, excuse me, and fellow commissioners. Yep. The number one reason, as Maggie stated, is just so that there's the geographic understanding or recognition by community members that, hey, that trail is in my neighborhood or in my community, and it's going to take me to this area, and I can make this connection. And ultimately, it also is a little bit easier for us to implement as well as to operate when we take really long corridors that might be 15 or 20 or even more miles long and break them into more bite-sized pieces. Then when we're collaborating on agreements, we don't necessarily have 5 or 7 partners in the room. It might be 2 or 3 or 4 partners, and it's easier to kind of come to consensus on the timing of implementation, any trail design things that still need to be worked out, community engagement aspects, as well as the winter maintenance, which we do rely very heavily on our local partners. So there's definitely some benefits from our perspective. I don't think the funding, I don't think we'll have funding challenges by having a shorter trail corridor, because it's still quite lengthy and still has a lot of great connections to destinations, schools, parks, places of religious worship, etc. So they're still fulfilling that regional intent. They're simply just going to be operated separately and implemented on their own timeframes and in partnership with the affected communities.
Thank you. Jeremy, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other questions from commissioners?
Always. This is Cecily.
Yes, go ahead.
I really appreciate how much community engagement was done for this project. It seems to really make a difference. But I had a question on the staff report on page 17 during the equity analysis. The second paragraph, you know, it seems like we usually see that same list of underrepresented groups. And the last sentence of that paragraph makes it sound like these people are underrepresented on all regional trails. But I was kind of curious that females were called out. Is this females who are people of color over the age of 60 or just females in general? I mean, are these a combination of underrepresented people or all standalone underrepresented groups?
Chair Uruso and Cecily, I can start this if that's okay. It's my understanding that the 2016 visitor study showed that women actually are underrepresented on our regional trails. The regional trails did not reflect the larger region as a whole. And excuse me, they were predominantly white and older male users. We are in the midst of a 2021 visitor study right now, and this is one of the things that I'm really interested in learning more about. Commissioners, we will be bringing this to you once that information is ready in sometime mid-2022. Thank you.
That's great news. Thank you, Emmett.
Okay, thank you for that. Other questions? Monica.
Thank you, Tony. Well, first of all, I wanna applaud to the master plan because it's a trail that it has been necessary for a while. I know the west side of the cities, north-south, is not that easy to access through between trails because all the highways. So I really like it. I do have concerns if people are talking about not being that happy with the trails crossing behind their properties. And my question is, the part that they are crossing is already park land or is something that we're gonna buy? And if it's already park land, what are we doing by avoiding people encroaching into the trail or the park, property?
Thank you, Chair and fellow commissioners, for your questions. I can take this one or start us off, and Kelly can follow up if she has anything else to add. So the specific situation where some residents are a little leery about the trail and it impacting their property or privacy is along Baker Road in Minnetonka. And the trail will actually go in their, so in front of their yards, and it will go along Baker Road. And what we believe at this time, although we couldn't get into all of the details, the engineering and design details, is by taking a look at it, that the trail will be within the right of way. And so we likely won't have to purchase the property from them, but we may need to purchase a temporary permit. Kelly, maybe jump in here while we are constructing the plan or the trail. And we are working, we have committed to working closely with those Baker Road residents. Both we have committed to them verbally and also to their city council that we will make sure that during that design process, we'll work closely with them to ensure their privacy, whether that's installing fencing or vegetation, things of that nature, looking out for their different things that they were concerned about, trees, driveways, those sorts of things. So we want to make sure that we reach a solution that works for everyone. And then Kelly, I don't know if you have any follow-up.
I just wanted to ask, were you also interested in how we protect parkland and trail land from private property encroachments? Was that the second half of your question, or did I? Okay, I think I'm getting that. Yeah, okay. That's a great question. One of the things that Three Rivers does on our parkland is we have signage that clearly denotes the boundary. It says Three Rivers property or boundary. And we don't have a very proactive approach to managing our boundaries, but rather when we become aware of an instance where a private property owner may be encroaching, mowing too much, dumping lawn clippings or leaves, building a shed, we work with them on an individual basis to rectify the issue. There's a couple times where it becomes more challenging and we'll have to actually remove encroachments and escalate things, but for the most part, people really want to do the right thing and they don't know where the property line is, or they claim they don't know where the property line is. And once you have that first conversation, the property or the behavior is corrected and they do want to be a good neighbor. But in general, we do it through signage, and then just periodically when we hear or see things that seem out of order, we investigate and we deal with it on an individual basis.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Kelly.
All right. Thank you, Monica. Other questions? Or if anyone would like to make a motion and move into discussion at this time.
I'll move approval of the recommendation.
I'll second that. Oh, sorry.
Motion from Bob and a second from Monica for the proposed actions from the staff report. So that, a second, so that I can actually go read that. So that's still what it's up. Never mind. So that motion is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Three Rivers Park District Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail Master Plan, acknowledge Three Rivers Park District's intent to split the Eagle Bryant Lake Regional Trail Search Corridor into two distinct but interconnected regional trails, the Eagle Lake Regional Trail and the Bryant Lake Regional Trail, which will then be formally documented in the next update of the Regional Parks Policy Plan estimated for 2024. And require Three Rivers Park District, prior to initiating any new development of the regional trail corridor, to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager. Is there discussion on that motion? Not going to make them antsy about their 5 o'clock deadline, huh? All right. Hearing no discussion, I guess we will move on to voting on that motion. Go ahead with a roll call, Sandy.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We'll start with Osada Brown,
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg,
Aye.
Cecily Harris,
Aye.
and just checking, is Todd Camry in? Nope. Bob Moeller,
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel,
Aye.
Anthony Taylor, still not with us, Kiana Yang,
Aye.
and Tony Russo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you.
Thank
That will
you.
thank you to the staff that joined us as well. That will then bring us on to our second business item, a Spring Lake Park Reserve Master Plan for Dakota County. And we have Tracey Kinney to present that one.
Councilmember, Chair, Commissioners, good afternoon. Hi, I'm Tracey Kinney. I'm Senior Planner in Parks. And Greg is going to pull up my presentation. Thank you so much, Greg. So today before you is the Spring Lake Park Reserve Master Plan. And this is on request of Dakota County. Today I'm joined by Nikki Geisler, Director from Dakota County Parks, and Lil Leatham, Senior Planner from Dakota County Parks, and they'll be here after the presentation to take any questions. Next slide, please. Spring Lake Park Reserve. The Park Reserve is located within the southeast part of the regional park system and the northeast part of Dakota County. The images on the left and in the middle are figures 1 and 2 of your business item. The Park Reserve is an existing 1,128 acre park reserve on the Mississippi River within the cities of City of Rosemount and the Township of Nininger. Archaeological sites in the Park Reserve document indigenous occupation from early prehistory to European contact. Spring Lake Park Reserve is within the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, as well as the Mississippi Flyway. Additionally, the Mississippi River Greenway Regional Trail travels through the park and along the river. It connects with the planned Rosemount Regional Trail as well. Figure to the right is figure 2 is in your staff item as well. It's an enlarged map. Next slide, please. So first, let's talk about how the master plan was shaped. The master plan process included public and partner engagement. The engagement process developed activities for particular communities based on the amount of times they visited the park. Additional engagement methods were used for demographics underrepresented in park visits, including Indigenous people, Hispanic, Latinx people, people living with disabilities, people with low incomes, youth, and older adults. There was a wealth of public engagement methods used. In the first phase of the public engagement process, over 1,000 residents participated. And in phase 2, another 1,000 residents participated. A few examples of the participation opportunities included the collaboration between the Met Council and Dakota County through the Youth and Parks Research Study. These events reached out and engaged Latinx people and youth. Another event was the Dakota County Technical College, and this event engaged people living with disabilities and youth, and there's many more. Some of the themes that emerged from the public engagement process include Bison Reintroduction, nature-based recreation, wayfinding, sustainable design principles, and concern over development. The master plan also engaged agency and organization partners. The project team engaged tribal historic preservation officers, the City of Rosemount, Nininger Township, the City of Hastings, the National Park Service, Minnesota DNR, and the YMCA. Next slide, please. The master plan's equity analysis described the demographics, public engagement, and evaluation of the public engagement process for underserved communities. People of color, people with disabilities, seniors, and those with lower household income comprise a smaller share of the park visitors than would be predicted by their proportion of the general resident population. A few of the current reasons for underrepresentation include distance from home, lack of awareness, time, and transportation options. there were many more. The historical reasons that these residents are underrepresented in the park reserve's visitorship can be traced back to the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862, after which many Dakota people living in the area were sent into exile. In the 150 years that have followed, government programs and policies have enabled white settlement and discouraged people of color from living in rural areas and suburbs surrounding Spring Lake Park Reserve. In addition, government policies, institutional racism, and personal discrimination have discouraged generations of people of color from visiting parks in general. The master plan also notes that people who were not raised going to parks tend to not visit parks as adults or take their children into parks. So moving on to the public engagement and participation. The master plan's engagement methods resulted in advice from specific groups of residents. This type of engagement produced a master plan that was directly shaped by the community input received. A few of the comments that I'd like to highlight right now is that the tribal historic preservation officers advocated for bison reintroduction, and shortly you will see the bison has been reintroduced to the park reserve. Additionally, Latinx participants advocated for additional river valley overlooks, camping, and restrooms. People living with disabilities advocated for accessible restrooms, and you will see shortly that all of these are coming into being. Moving on to the evaluation component here, as part of the engagement process, Latinx participants, youth, older adults, and low-income people advocated for better awareness of the park reserve. In response, Dakota County is developing a parks awareness and promotional plan in 2021 to provide recommendations to raise park system awareness across the county. Next slide, please. Now on to boundaries and acquisitions. So no changes are recommended to the boundary itself. However, the boundary does include some inholdings and some private and public inholdings. And this is figure 4 in your business item. The current boundary encompasses 19 acres not owned by the county, including 3 private properties and 1 public property. The costs associated with acquiring these parcels are not included in the master plan to maintain flexibility in the method of conveyance, and since the time horizon to acquire the parcels most likely exceeds the life of the master plan. Next slide, please. You've waited long enough. Here is the development concept of the master plan. So the master plan focuses on recreation and natural resource improvements, as well as programming and partner coordination. And a large component of this was interpretation and natural resource management. I mean, I already mentioned it, but it's truly exciting, and this is a really great plan that I'm bringing before you. The plan integrates the park reserve's traditional cultural properties, which was documented in a study, as well as identifies additional study, consultation, and monitoring for these properties. Improvements are organized into 2 parts. The upper part, which is the Shars Bluff East part, and that's to the right, and the lower part, which is to the left here, it's to the west. And so this image before you is also figure 4 in your business item. And I should note that when fully developed, this master plan will reach 15% development, which is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plans, 20% development guidelines for Park Reserve. As you, I'm sure, recall, but I'll just note here that park reserves in the policy plan have a guideline that includes a 20% development cap, and remaining 80% is in conservation. Next slide, please. So I have a couple of slides here for the concept development here. The upper park, which is the Sharves Bluff East, includes enhancing the picnic areas, the play areas, the Sharves Bluff Gathering Center. It includes community gardens, parking, water access trails, interpretation, and restoration areas. New features include the farm and Sharves Bluff river access and use areas. And there's a couple pictures to the right here. The river use area. There's the river use area. This is the Sharves Bluff access area. It will connect the river use area via the trail leading from the Mississippi River Greenway Regional Trail and a potential connection between the upper bluffs and the lower shoreline. And it has some historic property there that Dakota County is going to be interpreting. And then on the bottom is the farm area. And this includes a 4-season pavilion for event rental. And it also includes a reuse of the existing silo for an observation tower. Next slide, please. Okay, we're getting there. So lower park, this is the lower park, it's to the west. The major improvements here are bison. Wait, I'll get to the bison. 1 second. Major improvements for the lower park include bison reintroduction, redevelopment of the historic access to the river landing with educational and recreational connections at the river's edge. An indoor interpretive center will be the nexus for guided programming on interconnections among the prairie ecosystem and the bison, the river, and the landscape of the Spring Lake Park Reserve. Other improvements will include new hiking campsites, river access points and overlooks, outdoor classrooms, pavilions, interactive interpretation, trail extensions, and restoration areas. And this image here is figure 6 in your business item. So a little bit about the bison, the reintroduction of the bison returning to its keystone prairie species will help establish a diverse, resilient, and sustainable prairie ecosystem, as well as provide opportunities to view and learn about the bison and the prairie ecosystem, and also its strong relationship that this animal had with the indigenous culture. So Dakota County is excited about it, and this bison reintroduction is scheduled to happen in 2022. So stay tuned. Next slide, please. So the total estimated cost to implement this master plan is $26 million in general, and the estimated cost to operate the park for 10 years is an additional $349,683. Next slide, please. So the Spring Lake Park Reserve Master Plan is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Planning Strategy 1 in Chapter 5, and other council policies, which is Thrive 2040, and the other systems of the council. And I just wanted to show you a couple of the images here on the right. Dakota County engaged in the council's collaboration on the goose chase, and here are some images. And this slide here says that to ask the participants to take a picture of like their connection to the Mississippi River. So this is one of the pictures, and the previously for the equity analysis slide was a picture of the selfies of themselves of the favorite places in the play lot. So just a little bit more information there. Next slide, please. So with all that there before you, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Spring Lake Park Reserve Master Plan. And that's all I have for you today. I look forward to your comments, and Ms. Nikki Geisler and Lil Leatham is here to take any of your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tracey. Commissioners, what questions do we have on that presentation? or if anyone would like to start in with a motion on that. Yes, Sue. You're muted at the moment, but
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was holding off because I didn't want to budge ahead of any of the commissioners, but Tracey and Emmett have heard me gush about Spring Lake before, and I just, if you haven't, and I know a number of you, I'm sure a number of you have, but it is a hidden gem in Dakota County. I discovered it about 10 years ago and just adore that spot. I cannot see enough of it, and I can't advertise enough for it. It is just one of the most gorgeous spots along the river, and I would encourage you, if you're looking for something fun and relaxing to do on this gorgeous weekend, and if you've got time, it is very much worth the trip, and you will be awed by what you see.
indeed, thank you. Jeremy, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking about the ravine stabilization issues for this particular park reserve. And maybe this is a question for Emmett. What are the limits of our engagement opportunities or natural resource activities on park reserves like this to encourage or facilitate the establishment of conservation activities on adjacent lands within the watershed that are contributing or largely driving the ravine erosion and head cutting and everything else that's going on there? Thanks. Oh, I guess for context, because I recognize that that's one of the elements in the master plan here. I'm thinking about that as maybe something that ought to be incorporated in the master plan if there's a mechanism within our policy plan to address that. Thanks.
Commissioners, council member and Jeremy, thanks for the question. I think that staff might have a better perspective than me. I certainly, understand that the area of control from the park agency perspective is certainly boundary in. I know this is such an important corridor, and so your question is certainly on target. The MNRA corridor does have very specific development guidelines that are enforced, and a lot of that is around development on steep banks and slopes that exceed a certain amount. But I will be quiet and see if Lil or Nikki or I think Jeff Bransford is also on the call. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lil Latham with Senior Planner at Dakota County. And we do have one of our in-holding properties that we would like to either acquire a conservation easement for or include in the park that's for ravine erosion and natural resource stewardship. The county also has another effort through our land conservation protection plan and has identified conservation focus areas throughout the county. And the area surrounding Spring Lake Park is one of those areas. And that plan and program allow us to work with property owners on a voluntary basis on land conservation policies and to protect land either through easements or partnership. And we're focused especially on water quality and erosion.
If I may, I would like to follow up and ask, is there I've heard about farmer-led groups or friends groups that are local landowners potentially contributing their efforts to either applying peer pressure to their neighbors who maybe aren't practicing good conservation stewardship, even on low slope lands. I know steep slopes have those specific incentives and regulations associated with them, but with such large headwater areas, there's the potential to address things further up and reduce that or spread out the timing and quantity. And so I'm wondering about the broader reach and if there's watershed-based groups that are active in the area that are perhaps contributing to this plan or contributing to the land conservation protection plan in that way?
Well, I'm not sure about specific friends groups for Spring Lake Park Reserve and the areas around it, but we are working with the watershed and our soil and water conservation district on those erosion issues and actively seeking grants, and currently have active projects to address the specific ravine erosion within the park. The broader watershed scale, I'm not as familiar with the county's efforts with that, and maybe Nikki or Jeff, if you have anything to add on that question.
Thanks, Lil, and hello, commissioners. You're right. I am not quite sure about the broader county efforts in that area, and I think it's worth exploring. However, and we will take note of that. Jeff came off of camera, or on camera, so he might have something to say too. Jeff?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, I came off of camera to say I don't have anything to add. But I'm happy to look into that and get back to you if that's of interest to you.
Thanks, that'd be great. I am curious how this works out in connection with the master plan. That's all I had. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you all. Other questions? Or if anyone wants to make a motion from this?
This is Monica. I'll make a motion. But you have to read it, Tony. Sorry.
Are you just moving the proposed action from the staff report?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a second for that?
This is Jeremy. I'll second.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. So that motion on this one is short. It's simply that the Metropolitan Council approve Dakota County's Spring Lake Park Reserve Master Plan. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, yes, hearing no discussion there, we'll go ahead with a roll call vote on that motion. Go ahead, Sandy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say thank you to Councilmember Vento for that suggestion. I was just thinking about checking out one of the parks on this gorgeous weekend we've got coming up. So I think that one's not too far from my home. I'll have to go do that. But we'll start with Asada Brown.
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg.
Aye.
Cecily Harris.
Aye.
Todd Kemmery, are you on board yet? Don't see him. Bob Moeller.
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel.
Aye.
Has Anthony Taylor joined us? I don't believe so. Canna Yang.
Aye.
And Tony Russo.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Okay, thank you. We have a third business item today, which is a Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant request for Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve in Scott County, and we have Jessica Lee to present this one.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners, and Council Member. I'm Jessica Lee, Senior Park Planner, and I'm here to present business item 2021-298, Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund for the Muehlenhardt property in Scott County. Next slide, please. Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve is a planned park located in the very southwest corner of Scott County and the regional park system as a whole. The map on the right shows two regional trail search corridors that will someday intersect or go through the park. The park is also adjacent to the Minnesota River and the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge. Next slide, please. The Minnesota River Bluffs in southwest Scott County, known as Blakeley Bluffs, contain large areas of continuous forest, stunning viewsheds, dramatic topographic changes, and high habitat quality. Local and regional efforts to conserve the area as a park reserve date back to the early 1960s. When rapid development started happening in the late 90s, interest was renewed, and in 2005, Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve was added to the regional park system as a 6,000-acre park search area. In 2012, an acquisition master plan was completed that refined the park boundary to 2,400 acres. About 600 acres have been acquired to date. Next slide, please. The Muehlenhardt property, also known as the Triangle property, is 15 acres of Minnesota River floodplain forest. The entire parcel is considered both a Minnesota native plant community and a Scott County natural area corridor. Stewardship activities for this parcel are very minimal, and the long-term plan for this parcel is to provide park visitors a connection to the Minnesota River in a natural setting. Next slide, please. The Muehlenhardt property appraised at $30,000, and the seller has agreed to that amount. The total acquisition costs, including appraisal, legal fees, and stewardship activities, is $34,200. The grant amount of $25,650 will be funded with fiscal year 2021 Parks and Trails Legacy Fund. Acquisition funds remain from last year's legacy appropriation, and the council wishes to use previous year's funding before we start using our fiscal year 22 funds. Scott County will provide the 25% match of $8,550. Next slide, please. Our rationale for recommendation is that this acquisition is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund appropriation requirements, the Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve Master Plan, and Scott County is within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the Parks and Trails Legacy Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund. Next slide, please. So the recommendation before you is to approve a grant of up to $25,650 to Scott County using funding from fiscal year 2021 Parks and Trails Legacy Fund to acquire the vacant 15-acre Muehlenhardt property for Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve. And with that, I'm happy to take questions, and Alyssa Delgado from Scott County is also here. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. What questions do commissioners have on this one?
This is Bob.
Yes, Bob.
I would just say that this whole Blakeley Bluffs area and this reserve is kind of a gem in our collection. It's rustic, undeveloped in many spots, and adding this as part of the larger plan that we have makes good sense in my mind. I support it.
Okay. Are there questions or anyone that wants to move into a motion? I have some clarifying questions if nobody else does. Okay, I guess I'll go with those. Either council staff or county may have to speak to some of these. One is in the appraisal excerpt. This is Exhibit 4, page 15. It mentions that there might not be illegal access to this property, but they're kind of operating as if there was one. There's some uncertainty there. Could someone speak to what the state of the legal access question is?
Chair, I can attempt to speak to that, and then I'll ask Alyssa to fill in if I miss anything. My understanding is that for the purposes of the appraisal, there was question around legal access with the landowner, and so they assumed an access easement to appraise the property. Now, once Scott County acquires the property, it'll be adjacent to other properties they own, so there will be no issue with access to the parcel.
Oh, so the county would end up with legal access that the existing landowner may not currently.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Do county staff have anything to add or correct to that?
Yes, Chair, I just wanted to add that, yes, this parcel will be directly adjacent to property that we own. And there is also, so the property that there's railroad property that goes directly in between this parcel and other land that we own too. And there is an underpass under the railroad that we have permission to go through. So the original possible issue with access was, is not present.
Okay, thank you. There were some other things where there was possibly some mismatch between the purchase agreement and the grant application. I just wanted to clarify those related to easements and structures. I think the grant application said there's no easements, but the purchase agreement mentioned some. And then conversely, the purchase agreement mentioned a house that doesn't maybe seem to be there. So I wonder if you could speak to both of those. I'm not sure if those were actually issues or if they were maybe just copying and pasting and correcting some changes.
Chair, my understanding is that there's no structures on the property, but I'm going to see if Alyssa has anything to add.
That is correct, Chair. That property is 100% vacant floodplain forest, so there should not be any reference to structures on the property. So I don't know where that's coming from.
Let me see if I can try to find it. It was... what is this? Page 24. Under item 12 of the purchase agreement, where it says personal property, it says seller shall vacate the single family residence in a broom clean condition.
Chair, I'm going to assume that they used a template for this purchase agreement, and that was a standard clause that's included.
Okay, yeah, I figure that's probably the case, but it's a little odd. And then that's probably the same thing going on with easements, where the purchase agreement mentions some, but the grant application says they don't exist. So it may just be a matter of not updating the template to match the property in question. So it's probably not a big deal for us, but might be something to go look at again before this goes on to CDC.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make note of that and bring that back to make sure things are looked at.
All right, perfect, thanks. I think before I started bringing those up, somebody might have been attempting to start making a motion. Did I interrupt someone doing that?
Yeah, this is Bob Moore, and
yeah.
I would move that we approve this recommendation.
Okay, so we have a motion for the recommendation from the staff report from Bob. Do we have a second for that?
Hi, this is Cecily. I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Cecily. And that motion then is to approve a grant of up to $25,650 to Scott County using funding from the FY 2021 Parks and Trails Legacy Fund to acquire the vacant 15-acre Muehlenhardt property for Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve. Is there any discussion on that motion? I feel like this is simpler than usual, so I'm trying to run through my head why that is. Feel free to discuss if anyone else has anything while I think. Oh, I know what it is. I take it that Scott County is not requesting a possible consideration for future reimbursement from a CIP. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Okay, that's what my brain is thinking I should be saying. All right, any further discussion? Let's see. All right, then we will move on to a roll call vote on that as presented. Go ahead, Sandy.
Thank you. We'll start with Asada Brown.
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg.
Aye.
Cecily Harris.
Aye.
Bob Mueller.
Aye.
Jeremy Pikel.
Aye.
Kinney Yang.
Aye.
Tony Russo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you, Sandy. That then brings us on to our information item for the day, continuing our kind of equity nudge process that we started earlier this year. There is an ongoing Parks Ordinance update process happening in Ramsey County that has some impacts to equity concerns. So we're going to hear about that from both Amanda Lovelee and Kris Lencowski from Ramsey County. Go ahead with that when you're ready.
Hello, good evening, commissioners, chair, council member. Thanks for joining us tonight. Just a reminder, the Equity Nudge is our short, engaging information item to keep equity in front of us at each of these meetings. And today, we are super lucky and appreciative to have Kris Lencowski here from Ramsey County, who is going to lead our Equity Nudge, and he's going to share about the ordinance process that he's been leading and share what he's done, what he's learned, and what they're going to do next. So I'm going to pass the pretend mic to Kris.
Okay.
Thanks, Amanda. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. I just want to check quick. Did you have a presentation at all that Greg should be bringing up?
I do. If I can just share it, that might be easier.
Or if you can, yeah, I don't.
Can share.
There we go.
Can everyone
Cool.
see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's see. I was going through it, so let me just start over. Perfect. You can see that?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. I'm really excited to be here to talk through some of the work we've been doing with the park ordinance. Obviously, I'm not going to go through, there's a big rangy process, basically, to get an ordinance together and passed. Our ordinance was developed in 1992 and last updated in 2007. So it's been quite a while since the Ramsey County Park Ordinance had been updated, and we really wanted to situate equity at the center of it. So I want to talk a little bit about the community engagement process, which we really use to help develop and inform the ordinance. So we had kind of an interesting process. We first did an internal review. I think that's probably pretty standard for like an ordinance process, right? Trying to make sure the ordinance addresses modern trends and issues, trying to make sure that there are no holes to protect park property, trying to avoid recreational conflict, all those kind of things. But then really before we went to the wider public engagement, and in order to inform the wider public engagement, we did an equity review, which I'll talk about in a little more detail. And then after that equity review, we went out for public engagement with the wider public. So our racial equity review, we worked with a few different partners. So first, Ramsey County has what's called an equity action circle. During COVID, Ramsey County, we found the need to get a team of people together to help guide us to make equitable decisions during COVID. So we brought in a few people from that committee. We utilized the Public Health Law Center, which obviously focuses on public health, but also is recognizing that racial disparities is sometimes a driver of racial disparities is sometimes a driver of health disparities. So they're bridging more into racial equity work. We connected with public defenders working in Ramsey County who sometimes see the end product of these kind of ordinances. We worked with our own Parks and Recreation Parks Commission, our advisory commission, who have taken racial equity as kind of a focus of their work. And then our own internal Parks Racial Equity Leadership Team. And then from that racial equity review, we asked a number of questions. So what are the racial equity impacts of the ordinance? Are there sections of the ordinance that would impact BIPOC communities disproportionately? We know that laws can sometimes be enforced or administered unfairly. How do we prevent easy opportunities for injustice while keeping our parks safe and peaceful? And then one of the big things, which is that every infraction currently of the park ordinance is a misdemeanor, which carries a potential for 90 days in jail and a $1,000 fine. So that means that, you know, if you dump a load of toxic waste, that's a misdemeanor. If you walk on a ski trail, that's a misdemeanor too. So we thought that, you know, using one giant heavy-handed tool for everything was not the way to go, especially given the fact that there are state statutes that cover a number of things that might happen in the park, right? Just because it's not in the ordinance doesn't mean you can beat somebody up in a park, right? There's still a state statute that would apply in that instance. So we kind of asked, what are alternatives to criminalizing elements of the ordinance? So the results that we heard back was a charge to advance racial equity. One of the things that was cited often is that things like ordinances, like the language can be so painfully wrought that just to write it in plain language would really help people understand it, help people follow the rules better, and just be more respectful to, you know, people who might use Google Translate on the web to access these ordinances, that kind of thing. They suggested we increase park access. Currently, our park hours are a half hour before sunrise and a half hour after sunset. Strong move to decriminalize violations within the ordinance. That criminalization that, you know, I remember very distinctly somebody saying the phrase that parks should not be in the business of creating criminals. And that's very true in what we found. And then we should consider limiting smoking and tobacco use. And we should allow foraging, because foraging for nuts, berries, mushrooms, for instance, all those things are, it's kind of a food justice issue. And all those are the end product of a plant and don't have a lot of adverse impact on the environment. And then they were supportive of an inclusivity statement. I put that kind of below because we had kind of presented an inclusivity statement and said, what do you think of this? And got general support for it. So again, one of the interesting things about this is that we use the equity review as the basis for developing, like, what do we need to ask the public the public at large. So we gave a couple of options for each of these three big topics. So park access, we gave park hours of 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then we asked, what would it mean if our parks are open 24/7? What would be the appeal of that? What would be the concerns about that? We asked about smoking and tobacco use. So about limiting smoking within 25 feet of buildings, allowing smoking only in parking lots, and then a total smoking ban. And then asked about fines and penalties. So we asked what was appealing, what concerns people had about a petty misdemeanor, and about administrative fines. And so ultimately, with our wider community engagement, we saw some BIPOC representation there too. And one thing that we did for equity was to pull out those BIPOC responses and look at those individually and compare them to the other responses. And I think I don't know if good news, bad, or good news, whatever, thing that made everything a little easier, maybe I'll say it that way, is that they both aligned. Basically, we didn't see really any difference between significant difference, I should say, between responses for those three big topics. So ultimately, we recommended to the board just this last Tuesday a 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. Time for parks to be open. That would be slightly longer than almost any park agency in the regional park system. We're going to recommend a county-wide smoking ban. So that's something that we're going to work with public health to make that apply to all Ramsey County facilities. And that's work that's yet to come. And then we're recommending placing a misdemeanor penalty with administrative fines. Fines usually between $50 to $300, with a volunteer substitution for fines. If people can't pay, if their $50 fine is too much money, then we have a volunteer substitution that they can use. And that was something that came out in the equity review that was really important. So one thing that I'm going to highlight is that this 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., our commissioners asked us to consider to consider trails. Like, could we allow trails to be accessible 24 hours for commuting? So we're exploring that right now. So if anybody has any thoughts or considerations on that, I'd love to hear it. Last bit is any questions. I'll just say our next steps basically is that we're hammering through a couple of things that the county board has asked questions about. They basically accepted all those recommendations that we gave. And then we have to prepare the finalized version of the ordinance. And then probably in late November or early December, we're going to bring it to the board. There's about a 3-month process almost to get an ordinance reviewed. There's a public hearing process, and then to final adoption, and then I think there's a 45-day waiting period, and then it is enacted. So really exciting work. I'm really proud that we put equity at the center of this process, and excited about the outcomes that we'll be able to present to the public all in one package soon.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Questions and feedback from commissioners?
For context, this 5 to 11 p.m. was in comparison to the prior rules, which are, was it an hour before dawn and an hour after dusk? Is that right?
Half hour before sunrise, half hour.
That's what it was.
Yeah, which means in the winter, if you want to go walk your dog on a Ramsey County trail after work, you really can't do it. So we found that to be, and we've heard from the public about that for a long time. So that was certainly like not a surprise anywhere in the process.
I've gotten warnings on my car about that.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. I mean, it's just that's not kind of the way everything functions. The 24-hour proposal did not get much positive feedback. It in fact riled up people quite significantly, especially people who live adjacent to parks. I think I can probably safely say. On the other hand, there were some supporters of that proposal, but we didn't feel like there was enough support there to kind of counteract the other issues. And I would say that the BIPOC comments aligned as well on that issue. So I think we would have been maybe in a different situation if we would have that would have been a more, something to consider in terms of equity. But definitely got some enthusiasm from the public, which I think is great, right? If we're not proposing bold things and trying to really ask good questions, which is like, why do we need park hours? Then we'll never know. So,
now you mentioned with that considering possibly having a different carve out for trails than general parks. I was also wondering, is there any consideration still being given to possibly having a different, more permissive rule for public water accesses within the county?
Good question. Not at this time. We're not really considering a difference there. That's kind of why we pushed the hours sort of as early as anybody has them in the county and around the county, and as late as anybody has them in and around the county. That we're, the goal was to kind of like try and serve a maximum of users and and types of uses without while still kind of respecting the community's desire to have some limits placed on access to, not necessarily limits placed to access on parks, but mitigate some of the concerns there.
Yeah, one reason I bring that up in particular is the combination of both that there is some equity impact there by income of people that can afford to own lakeshore of their own versus the general public that has to use the water access to get to that.
Yeah.
And also that Ramsey County is kind of unusual in that elsewhere across the region, most of our water accesses are owned and operated by the DNR rather than our local park agencies. Whereas within Ramsey County, almost all of them are owned and operated by Ramsey County as part of your parks. So while you have consistency in your park hours with other ones, there's an inconsistency in water access because you have ownership and management of them where other agencies typically don't.
Yeah, I hear that. We didn't hear a lot about it in the community engagement. That wasn't brought up as frequently. I mean, and I think it, one thing that we're considering with making the trails different is that like things get fuzzy, right? Because like some trails go basically right through a regional park. So like when are you on a trail, when you're not on a trail? What is that fuzzy line between, we're trying to reduce like conflict with, or potential conflict, I should say, with law enforcement. So, if it's like, oh, I'm using the boat launch, I'm just working my way over there. Things can get fuzzy if there are different rules for different places within the park. So it's something we're kind of evaluating still, and I think needs still a little bit more consideration. But
yeah.
Well, I definitely support the 24 hours on regional trails. And for that matter, I would hope the state of Minnesota trails are also 24 hours. I moved here a few years ago from a different metropolitan area, and they found that many people commuted on the regional trails, like to jobs at airports and for night shifts, when you need to be somewhere at 11 at night, or you get off work at 5, 6 in the morning and you rely on a bicycle. So, and I'm sure that sort of trail user, is commuting. They're, cruising through a regional park or along a county road or something. I also fully support the ban on smoking because again, it's a huge amount of trash that you find in parking lots, that you find near visitor centers, and gosh, it's about time.
Yeah, and that tracks definitely with what we heard in the community engagement, like trash, like even fire concern when it comes to vaping, even that those that vape pens present a certain risk there, and then obviously like parks are supposed to be healthy places that we all come to, be healthy and do healthy things and exercise and spend time with family. And so I think that really like came through in the community engagement that's the spirit of parks, and that we should really consider that. So yeah, good thoughts.
I did hear one interesting concern as I was looking through some conversations about this that I don't know how it's being dealt with or if it's being dealt with, which is in terms of decriminalizing ordinance violations. that's nice in that, you know, people don't have criminal records for minor things and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that was that when things are criminal, because they're more serious, they have certain protections. Someone mentioned the fact that you can be entitled to legal counsel, and if you can't afford that, you get a public defender. And in an administrative fine kind of situation, you might not have that, and if people don't necessarily understand what they're up against, that might be a bit of a barrier. And I'm just curious whether, I don't know what sort of administrative citations even exist at the county level currently. Is there any sort of provision for some kind of representational assistance for people in that context?
There is an appeal process. So I guess I'll back up a second, which is to say that we're developing this process, right? So it doesn't exist currently, and so parks and environmental health actually kind of kismet, like at the same time, we're kind of going in the same direction, right? Decriminalizing some things for slightly different purposes. Environmental health does like the health inspections at restaurants and whatnot, so they have their own kind of need for that sort of system. So they're actually sponsoring the administrative ordinance change right now that's going to pave the way for us to be able to change this. So if we didn't have that, we would be changing both of the ordinances at the same time. So we're glad to have some partners there with environmental health. But there is an appeal process built into that. And we still have to work out some details on that. I suppose you could have representation that's not like provided to you. But our maximum fine is $300, and that's for I can pull it up. It's really only for 4 to 6 different things, which is like property damage, major dumping of waste, encroachments, discharging weapons, firearms, and fireworks. So pretty serious things. And
so I
then
guess
besides that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I guess the key point there is we're not just adding park things to an existing administrative procedure. That's an entirely new concept for the county.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not new for municipalities. This is actually much more common on the municipal level. But yeah, definitely new for our county for sure.
Yeah, so that'll be something to kind of keep an eye on as it goes in and see if it needs tweaking over the years.
Yep. Yep.
Other commissioner comments? Okay, or we have our liaison. Go ahead, Sue.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I have to ask a quick question here. Kris, thank you very much for this really informative presentation. I live in Ramsey County, not far from Battle Creek Park, so this is very informative. I also used to live right near Lake Phelan, so our parks are treasures. My question has to do with your engagement and to what extent you got feedback from senior citizens like me, as well as people with disabilities and challenges as it relates to access.
Yeah, good question. We did not track age nor disability in the process, particularly when we did the survey. So, and I think it came down to just like how do we focus and how do we keep the survey short so that we get more participation in it. The county right now, they have a particular focus on racial equity, so that's kind of where we focused our energy. I can tell you from speaking to lots of people that we got pretty good engagement from seniors and people in their, I'd say like 50s, 60s, 70s in there. So, but that's just anecdotal. And then in terms of people with disabilities, I think we talked a little bit with Courage Kinney about some of it. But I'm kind of stretching I think that was a while ago, so I'm kind of stretching my brain to remember it. But yeah, mostly we focused on racial equity in terms of the review there. So, but good questions, yeah. Yeah, I know, for instance, with our signage project, because that is something that, people need to access in the parks. It's difficult. For that, we are specifically asking some questions about disability because we want to make sure that we know that there are barriers there to being able to access. Good question.
Thank you.
Yep.
And that might come in too with when you were talking about language stuff and needing to use possibly Google Translate to look at the ordinance.
Yeah.
I know right now it's published as a PDF, which is maybe not the most Google Translate friendly format for that kind of stuff to be posted on your website.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure
yeah.
that'll
And it's
come
in
up.
like tiny font and like 3 columns, and it's very painful.
And I'm assuming that things like screen readers probably don't love that either.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, we heard a lot about that, about just like accessibility to be able to, see and read the ordinance. It's just so painful to read right now. I think we went from like, when I brought it into my like Google Doc, it was like 14 pages, and then we got it down to like 5 pages, something like that. I think is the most recent draft. So
okay.
Less words makes it clearer. Lots fewer shalls. So anyone who likes the word shall or shall not, I'm very sorry. But...
Any other comments before we let Kris go? All right. Well, thank you. I'm certainly excited to see that project move forward. I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to make a nice difference for a lot of people in there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to share this work with you.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, so that brings us on to reports. I think my main thing for anyone who wasn't here at the very beginning of our meeting, as you probably noticed, we have a new council liaison. Council member Sue Vento is joining us for that role now, to replace Linnea, who has moved on from her council position. And I believe that, I know that was posted. I don't know if that posting is still open, but there will be a new council member at some point shortly. But the new person won't necessarily be coming in to us. We'll have Sue here. Thank you for that. I think that's kind of all I have. Certainly this is the season that you'll see in our various parks that there have been prescribed burns happening and closures for special deer hunts and some buckthorn control and things like that happen every fall. So as you visit parks, you can keep an eye out for those changes and closures and all that. But otherwise, administratively, I don't think I have anything much interesting. So other commissioner reports. All right, hearing none, we'll go on to staff.
Chair Uruso, council member and commissioners, I have one report, but first I wanted to just comment on, we didn't get any much discussion on the bison in the Spring Lake Park Reserve. I'm so excited about that. There have been talk about introducing bison for so long in many of the park agencies, and I think Dakota County won it. So congratulations. And I know people were excited about that. That is not. Oh, Nikki, did you want to say anything?
I was gonna say I'm still on. I wish I could take credit for all of that. I just get to be a part of the celebration, being new to Dakota County. But I was out there yesterday. Fencing is just about fully in, and we'll be welcoming the bison next fall. I'm really excited.
Very cool.
I can't wait. Way to bring it across the finish line, Nikki. It was all you.
Right. Well, thank you all.
It's exciting. I can't wait to see it. See them. My only a report today is an opportunity for our commissioners. The council has kicked off its Metropolitan Development Guide. The Metropolitan Development Guide is currently known as Thrive 2040, and this is a 10-year process. And Tony and I talked about this ahead of time, and he said, Emmett, if you take this, that would be great. So we're looking for 4 to 5 MPOS commissioners to participate in what I'm going to call a couple workshops. They'll be in December and January. They haven't been scheduled yet. Sue, if you have anything further you want to say about the Metropolitan Development Guide, you feel free. But I'll just say this is really just to step back and think really big and think about what are those big issues or trends that the council should really be considering as we're moving into the next decade with the Metropolitan Development Guide. I'm going to send something out to all commissioners that I sent to Tony, and it just gives a little bit more information on the opportunity. If you're interested, please let me know. I think it would be, you know, parks shows up in the Metropolitan Development Guide, but I'd like it to show up even stronger just because I think we have such an important role with so many of the issues facing our region, whether it's equity, climate change, conservation, you name it. I'll send that out to everybody. If you're interested or you have further questions, please just let me know, because if I can't answer your questions, I definitely can find the people who can. So thank you again, everyone.
All right, thank you, Emmett. And for reference, Sue, you also kind of get lumped in with staff. You're not actually on our agenda as a report, but if you have anything you'd like to say, you can butt in after staff do at this point. So if you have anything else you want to say to introduce yourself or about anything we've talked about, feel free.
Oops,
You are
I
still
think you're
muted at the
muted.
moment, though.
Yeah, after 19 months, you'd think I'd have this down pat. Mr. Chair, I just want to thank you. I'm really excited to be a part of this group, and I was both honored and thrilled to be asked to be the liaison. I have been involved with parks and environmental issues for quite a while and have a passion for this, and it's really rooted in my background as an educator. I was an elementary teacher many moons ago. I used to always tell people I started teaching when I was 12, and it used to be funny, and now the math is too hard to figure that out. So anyway, bad joke. I have been a strong champion of the work of Richard Loop on the impact outdoor spaces, and in particular parks, have on child development and their academic and physical and emotional growth. And so this is great. I'm just thrilled. I will do my best to keep my mouth shut unless I have something really relevant to say. So thanks for welcoming me so nicely tonight.
All right, happy to have you. Okay, well, with that then, I believe we are ready to adjourn for the day and meet our 2-hour maximum requirement once again. So thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night,